Hi, let's have a look at scenario-driven mocks and how you can use composite scenarios in Traffic Parrot to reduce your mock maintenance costs at scale. So we're going to be looking at this problem where you've got hundreds of recorded mocks. For example, you've got your London store mock, you've got your Paris store mock, you've got more store mocks, you've got your user Sam Smith mock, you've got your guest user mock, and you've got more user mocks, etc., etc. And they're being used by your application and the tests that are testing your application, where the application connects to these mocks, okay? And what are the issues with these types of mocks? Unclear intent. You can't tell what business scenario we're in when we're running a test or looking at the mocks. You get lost context. For example, you've got a mock that has 17 clothing categories, but which one is actually imported in your test? You don't know that. There's no semantic meaning. Mock names are just random file names. When new developers join your team, they don't know which mocks to use for new tests. There's test and mock modification fear. They're afraid to change the mocks, and this results in a brittle test suite. You've got redundant data, same user, product, or store copied everywhere and used by a number of tests for no real reason. You've got inconsistent updates, so some mocks are updated, others left behind, for example, when the API changes. You've got synchronization issues. Different mocks have slightly different versions. Different tests use slightly different versions of mocks, and you're doing this copy-paste testing, so developers will be copying and pasting to reuse blobs without real understanding of the mocks. You're gonna have hundreds of mocks to fix when the real API changes. The tests are fragile and break due to irrelevant test data, drift, and ultimately you've got this issue of mock maintenance burden that we've just discussed that prevents API mocking adoption at scale at your organization, because developers just don't want to use these mocks because they're a maintenance hell. So what can we do with that? We can use scenario-based mocks in Traffic Parrot and remove that duplication. So we're going to compose a base scenario, and there's several ways to do it in Traffic Parrot. For example, using automated Traffic Parrot mock cleanup, which is going to be shown in another video. And here we just focus on building scenario-based mocks. So we've got the base scenario, which has any user, any country, any product, any store. So it does have those mocks, but the details don't matter. So for example, if you're running your app loads smoke test, you can just use the base scenario with any user, any country, any product, any store, and the details don't matter because it just tests that the app or the mobile app, for example, that uses these mocks loads, right? However, if you want to test the business case where a user is inactive, you can't have any user, you need an inactive user, right? So you combine all of those base scenario mocks and add in user inactive scenario, okay? So the user inactive business case doesn't care about the country or the products or the stores or the navigation or anything else. However, it does care about the user being inactive. So we need to change that property about the user, okay? There's many advantages of this approach. So you can have these reusable overrides, compose any user or blocked user, any country or an Arabic country. You got less duplicated blobs, you got clear intent. For example, any blocked user is much better than Sam Smith, right? Any blocked user is very clearly stated there in the name that it's any blocked user, right? What happens if an API changes? Well, there's a fixed minimal number of mocks that needs to happen, and it's much easier to set up edge case tests because you just use the defaults and set up error conditions on unusual tests, unusual states or business scenarios in those overrides. And for the nerds like me, you can think about these scenario-based mocks in a way, looking at it from software engineering principles and mocks. For example, single responsibility. Each mock models one business scenario, so one reason to change when the business scenario changes. You got open close, so you add new business scenarios without breaking existing ones. There's less repetition and there's clarity over cleverness. For example, names explain intent and they're not buried in payloads. Okay, so let's have a look at how we can do this in Traffic Parrot by using the composite scenario functionality. So first of all, let's look at Traffic Parrot. And first thing we'll do is create a base scenario. And it's automatically selected here for us, and we'll add some mocks to it, okay? So what we'll do is add a user mock. We'll add a country mock. We'll add a store mock. And you see those are default responses with some sensible defaults. So country, user store, and product. And we can change the names of these mocks as well to match the intent. So any product. Any store. Any country. And any logged in user. All right. So now we've got the base set up. So if we query, let's use curl to simulate what your app would be doing if we were to test it, and it would communicate with the backend services and fetch the users, for example. It would get the default user, and country will get the default country, and product will get the default product. Okay, so what we've got right now is the default base scenario set up. Okay, and you could run your app load smoke test right now against your app that will communicate with these mocks, and since it doesn't care about the details of the users, countries, products, or stores, it would just pass, right? But because the application is running and communicating effectively with the backends. However, if we're testing the user inactive business case, we'll need to change the flag, active flag on the user, to set it to false, so the user is inactive. So we'll combine a base scenario with a new scenario. We'll just create the user inactive scenario, and that way we'll be able to run the user inactive test. Okay. So right now, let's create a user inactive scenario, and say that the user is inactive. Any inactive user, and we'll say active equals false. There we go. All right, let's change the name as well to any inactive user. All right, so we've got the base scenario set up, and we've got the user inactive scenario set up. Now we need to use the composite scenario to combine these two. Right now we're using only two scenarios in the composite scenario. You could use more. You can say it's an inactive user in an Arabic country, or an Arabic country scenario with unavailable products and the defaults, etc. So it doesn't have to be two. We're just starting with two because it's simpler. So we'll be going to Virtual Services, configure the composite, add the base, add the user inactive, and switch to the composite. Okay, and now the composite mocks should be served. So if we look at this stuff in here, we should see all the mocks, not just the logged in user mock, but also the inactive user mock. Okay, and oh, I forgot about one thing. We can see it now. We've got two requests, the two mocks for /user. So which one's going to be returned? Well, the first one, it's not determined unless you specify the priority. Okay, so in order to specify the priority, we'll go back to Virtual Services. We'll clear this and go back to the user inactive scenario and edit this mock and say that the request priority is 1, so more than 10, which is the default. And save that and configure the composite again and use the composite and see what happens now. All right, so right now we've got two mocks in here, the inactive and any logged in user. However, the any logged in user has the request priority with the default, which is 5, and we've got the inactive user, which is which has a request priority 1. So whenever we receive the request to /user, the one with the highest priority will be returned. And that's how composite scenarios work, okay? So let's test that. So now if we request a user, we've got an inactive user. Any inactive user false. However, we can still query for products and countries and stores, etc. All right. So what we've got right now is we can run the user inactive test against our application, which will use the mocks and all the base scenario mocks along with user inactive scenario mocks. Okay, and I understand that I've created these mocks manually. There's an automated way of helping you navigate this complexity of having many recordings, digesting them into these base scenario mocks. It's called automated mock cleanup in Traffic Parrot, and there'll be a video coming up soon. However, feel free to reach out to us and I'll be happy to do a demo to you on your data and show you how it works on your data, your mocks that you've recorded. So yeah, any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you for watching and speak to you soon. Bye bye.